Good evening, folks, and welcome back to day number 58 of the Bible in 365. Today we are taking a look at Deuteronomy chapter 9, beginning in verse 22, and are exploring all the way to Deuteronomy chapter 12, ending in verse 32, which happens to be the end of the chapter. All right, folks, we've got quite a bit to talk about today, so let's go ahead and get started. So picking up again in Deuteronomy chapter 9. At the beginning of the chapter, as we talked about yesterday, discusses how the Lord delivers the Anakites into the hands of the Israelites, not because of the righteousness of the Israelites, but rather because of the unrighteousness or the wickedness of the Anakites. We also see that Israel has this tendency to rebel and this tendency to forget the faithfulness of God on their behalf and everything that he has done for them. And so Moses goes up to receive the tablets that God inscribes with on his finger, known as the Ten Commandments, and he returns to see that they had turned away from God and they had made for themselves a golden calf. And Aaron and the Israelites participated in worship of a false god, and the Lord wanted to blot them out from the face of the earth, but Moses fell down on his face for 40 days and nights and fasted and interceded on behalf of Israel. At the end of chapter 9 today, we see a similar thing happen, that when the Israelites are told to go up from Kadesh Barnea to then inherit the promised land, they disobey God yet again, and Moses has to fast yet again on their behalf so that they're not blotted out from the face of the earth because of their wickedness and their ungodliness. And so Moses intercedes on behalf of Israel and says, Lord, think of what the nations will say. It's your reputation that's on the line. You brought us out of Egypt only to have us die? The nations are going to make a mockery of your name, so rather still deliver us into the promised land. So what ends up happening is the Israelites die in the wilderness, the generation, and then the next generation is going to inherit the promised land. And what's beautiful about this, in somewhat a poetic moment, is a friend of mine told it to me this way. God took the Israelites out of Egypt, right? But he couldn't take Egypt out of the Israelites. And so they had to die to themselves. And in this case, they literally had to die. A new birth had to come forth, just like how we have to die to self in order to then be born again. Moving forward to Deuteronomy chapter 10. All right, so Deuteronomy chapter 10 is all about how Moses created a second set of tablets. He didn't create them, but he collected a second set of tablets because the first ones he broke out of anger because of the disobedience of the Israelites when he descended from the mountain and saw them worshiping a false god. And so essentially a second set of tablets were given to Moses, and they were chiseled out of stone. And then he built a wooden ark for these tablets to be placed inside. And that ark was made of acacia wood. And these were the 10 commandments that the Lord proclaimed on the mountain. And so then Moses put them inside the ark as the Lord commanded him to do. And then it recounts how the Israelites moved towards Mizerah. That's where Aaron passed away and was buried. And then how he was succeeded by Eleazar, his son, as a priest. And then they travel along the streams towards Jehobathoth. And it talks about how the tribe of Levi were given the orders to carry the Ark of the Covenant in front of the congregation of Israelites and to proclaim blessing in his name. And so they were just supposed to follow the Lord's commands day by day and not to look past the day. And then also it recounts how the Lord gives instructions to Moses, how he stayed 40 days and 40 nights on the mountain. And at this point, Moses is instructed to take the people and head towards the promised land. And there's this command for the Israelites to walk in obedience to the Lord. What's really cool about the ending of chapter 10 is that it talks about how there was only 70 people that went into Egypt. So this was the story of Joseph and his brothers and how God provided for them and how there was 70 of them there in Egypt, and now how they've become a multitude as numerous as the stars in the sky. And so this is showing how the Abrahamic covenant is being fulfilled. Moving forward to chapter 11. So Deuteronomy chapter 11 reiterates this idea of loving and obeying the Lord. If you haven't picked up on that yet, it is really, really important. The biggest thing is to trust and to obey and to love the Lord. And so Moses tells the people of Israel that they should love God, they should keep his commandments, and that they should abide by his laws and in his laws always and keep his decrees. Moses is trying to instill within them this idea that they have to follow these commandments and live in obedience as they enter into the promised land. There is this cryptic warning, for the Israelites to not turn away from God, because they will fall off and worship other gods, and this would just anger and stir the wrath of God. And the Lord would shut up the heavens, and his anger would burn against them, and he'd cause the rain to stop and the ground to become infertile, and essentially just make the life of the Israelites hell. And this is why the Israelites had to, guard their hearts. They had to, obey and keep the commandments in their hearts and remember those. And they had to teach them to their children. And they had to carefully observe and follow these commandments. Moving forward to Deuteronomy chapter 12. In Deuteronomy chapter 12, it tells us that there is only one place of worship, and how the Israelites aren't supposed to once again stray from the commands. And essentially, if they see in the land people worshiping false gods, they're supposed to destroy all these altars and the sacred stones and any other items that were used for worship in the land as they go and conquer and take over the land. And so essentially, Israel is being warned to not fall into the seduction of pagan worship and the worship of pagan gods, and to not worship idols and false gods. And in order to resist the temptation, just right off the bat, they need to destroy and get rid of all these idols. At the end of this chapter, it says that the Lord thy God shall cut off the nations before you, and you will succeed them, and you will dwell in this land. But be careful not to follow any of them, otherwise you will be destroyed like them. So don't make an abomination of the Lord. Do not serve or worship their gods. Don't marry into their families, but burn what they have. Burn this false religion and their false gods in the fire. And do everything I command of you and observe it. Don't add to it. Don't diminish it. But do exactly the letter of the law. It is here with this just overwhelming sense of urgency that the Israelites need to actually obey the Lord and follow his commands and not fall away from him, that we end our reading for tonight. Please, folks, join me tomorrow as we take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 13, beginning in verse 1, and explore all the way to Deuteronomy chapter 16, ending in verse 8. As always, folks, God bless.